Well, the sun is shining, it's hot outside, but it's the Lord's day, and it's a great day to be alive. And I'm thankful as I stand here before you for the prayers that you've offered on my wife's behalf as she has been overcoming with the grace of God and help of God and modern medicine, brain cancer, and she's doing very well. All the scans are coming back clear currently. She has another one coming up soon. We pray that it'll continue to do so, but I know that you've been praying, some of you have said so, and we thank you for that. We really believe that the fervent prayers of a righteous man still accomplish much, and we thank you for what you've done. It's always a delight to be with you. Well, I'll believe it when I see it. Have you ever said that or heard someone say that? I've said it. I'll believe that when I see it. But our message today is essentially, I'll believe that even if I've never seen it. Even if no one that I know has ever seen it. And so someone says, well, I don't think you can do that. Well, really, let me just ask you right now, do a little quick test. Do you believe that you will be resurrected from the dead someday? Yes or no? Do you believe you will be resurrected from the dead? Have you ever seen someone resurrected from the dead in your lifetime? What makes you think that can happen? Why do you believe something you've never seen? But then we get back to Hebrews chapter 11, which as the very basis of faith includes the not seen element of it. Look at Hebrews chapter 11, and we'll explore this a little bit as we see some individuals who show us that we can say, I'll believe it even though I've never seen it. In Hebrews 11:1, now faith is the substance or the assurance of things hoped for, the evidence of, notice, things not seen. And then he goes on to say, for by this faith, the elders obtained a good report. Through faith we understand. Now some would say, you can't say that in the same sentence. Through faith we understand. They say faith is not connected to knowledge. It's just believing in something that you don't have any evidence for. Notice, saying that we believe in things we've never seen is not saying we believe in things for which we have no evidence. Saying that we believe in things we've never seen is wholly different than that, because I was not there when this world was made. You weren't either. And yet through faith I understand that the worlds were framed by the Word of God, so that things which are seen were not made of things which do appear. Now, I will never be able to say as long as I live, I remember seeing them build the Central Church of Christ in Caruthersville, Missouri. I was there when they hung the lights. I was there when they put the speaker up on the ceiling. I was there when they put the pulpit stand up on the stage. Yep, I saw it all. I didn't see any of it. How hard would it be to convince me that someone built this building? Not hard at all, because every house is builded by some man. Have you ever known a house that wasn't? Every house is built by some man, Hebrews 3:4. But he that built all things is God. Now the St. Louis Science Center, I don't know if it's been years since I was there, so I don't know if this is still the case. I doubt that it is. But many, many years ago, I was there visiting with an elder in the Lord's church. We were going to go to a ball game that night. We were looking for something to do during the day. It was kind of wet, and so we decided to go to the St. Louis Science Center. And I love true science. My wife has been a science teacher at times. And then I was in this science center, enjoying for the most part the exhibits, but also noticing how often they were attributing evolution as the explanation for what we were seeing. And I thought to myself, they're really laying it on thick with evolutionary explanations for which we have no evidence. They have no evidence. But then I came around and saw this blank wall, and the only thing on that wall at the time were like maybe 9 video monitors. And if you looked at the one on the far left, it showed in fast frame fashion camera work showing the people on their machines with their hard hats clearing the land. Next monitor shows the laying of the foundation, and then it just looked at, it chronicled in video fashion in stages the building of the St. Louis Science Center. You could see the evidence, even though you weren't there to see it yourself with your own eyes. You could see the video evidence that it really did happen. I've never left graffiti anywhere in my lifetime, but I thought about it that day. I wanted to put above those monitors, for every house is built by some man, but he that built all things is God. God is the one who built this world. And we weren't there to watch it happen, but I know for a fact that it happened. I know it. I wasn't there to see it, but I know that just as houses don't build themselves, neither do universes. Neither do human beings. If you look at your body and the complexity of your body, one tiny strand of your DNA is more significant in complexity than things that you and I believe in every day that we think, well, look, the watch that I'm wearing, no one in their right mind would believe that it just happened as a result of an explosion and all of the parts just so happened to land in a fashion where it was digitally ready for me to turn it on and count my steps, etc., etc., etc. Listen, we have evidence, even though we've never seen it. Now, I've never seen a resurrection take place from the dead, but there's plenty of evidence in history of those who did see it, and the fact that the empty tomb of Jesus is still empty, and that the body of Jesus was never produced, and that Jesus Christ did rise from the dead, and you could not have selected a better song than "We Saw Thee Not." What a great song to illustrate this point. We didn't see all these things happen, but we know that they happened. Now, you can believe, and you often do believe in things you've never seen. I never saw Abraham Lincoln in the flesh. Never did. But there were plenty of folks who did and who have historical, reliable evidence to indicate his existence. But you know what? I have something even better than historical, uninspired records. I have an inspired record, and I invite your attention to remain with me there in Hebrews chapter 11 as we go through individuals who saw the invisible and believed in things they'd never seen. Let's start in verse 7. Noah, did you see ever before God told you to build an ark, did you ever see a worldwide flood? Well, someone might say, well, how do you know it was a worldwide flood? It was probably just a local flood. There's several reasons why it could not have been a local flood. Number one, God said he would never do the same thing again that he'd just done, and there have been plenty of local floods since then, so we know that this flood was different than any flood the world has ever seen since that time. Also, if all God was wanting to do was preserve Noah and the righteous individuals in his family, then all they would have had to do is migrate over a period of decades or years, even over a century, to a different location where the flood would not be. They could have led all the animals to that location. There wouldn't have been need for an ark if it was only going to be a local flood. But because it was a universal flood, there was a need to board the ark of safety. Now picture this, you're Noah, and in Genesis 6:14, God says, Noah, make thee an ark of gopher wood. And he tells Noah that he's going to destroy the world. Now, could Noah stop and say, okay, yeah, I remember the last time a family boarded such an ark and survived a worldwide flood. I remember that, yeah. And because I have documented evidence that someone else has already made it through, I believe that I will make it through. Noah, have you ever seen a worldwide flood? No. Have you ever seen a family survive a worldwide flood on a vessel that God said to build? No. What makes you think you will? I trust God. The resume that God has of creation shows me that if He can make the world, if He can make the seas, if He can make the water, He can control them. And God would not have told me to build an ark if He didn't know how to build things. Look how He built the universe. Look how He built me. I have a resume of accomplishment from God that makes me believe He can do things I've never seen done. And I know that God can keep me safe through this. In fact, Hebrews 11:7 says, by faith, Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by the which he condemned the world, and became heir of righteousness, which is by faith. And so Noah believed in something he'd never seen because he believed in God, and what he had seen God already do convinced him God could do things he'd never seen God do. Abraham, verse 8. Have you ever seen all of the places that God is going to lead you? Do you know the itinerary yet of which stop you're going to make first and where you're going next? And what some people are meticulous planners when it comes to a vacation, and they've got every stop plotted and planned, and here's where we're going to go this night. Some are more like, let's just go with the flow and go in a direction and see where it leads us. Abraham, God's going to lead you to places you've not seen yet, or places that you're going to go that you don't know where you're going yet. Do you trust Him? Look at verse number 8 of Hebrews 11. By faith Abraham, when he was called to go out into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, he obeyed. He went out not knowing whither he went. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew with whom he was going, and that's all he needed. I trust God. God, you've got this. We use a GPS to get us from point A to point B. Those work wonderfully most of the time. Years ago, I was speaking at Williams Chapel in Murray, Kentucky, and that was the first time I had spoken there. And so I checked it the night before on MapQuest. I checked it on Google Maps. I checked it on TomTom, the little portable device I had at the time. I don't even know if they make those anymore. And they didn't have cell phone technology then that had the maps on it like we do today. There was one other site, Rand McNally. I went to Rand McNally. All 4 places gave me the exact same set of directions. So when I left the hotel that morning, I was supremely confident that I knew where I was going. And when the voice said, "You've reached your destination," all I saw was a clump of trees. And I thought, is the church building tucked back in those trees somewhere? And I'm peering and looking, and I wasn't smart enough to bring the contact number of the man that I'd been talking to. It turned out to be one of my wife's relatives, actually. And so I didn't have the number on me. And so I'm driving around looking in desperation for the church building when the phone rings. "Brother Clarke, yes. Are you all right?" "No, I'm lost. I have no idea where I am right now." He said, "Well, do you see any identifying markers or anything?" I said, "Well, I did just pass a sign that said such and such a state park." He said, "Brother Clarke, you're 35 miles from us." 35 miles? When you go 17 miles the wrong direction, you have to come 17 back the right direction and then go a little bit further down. And I was way. He said, "We'll just sing till you get here." Embarrassing for sure. Listen, I don't believe for one moment the people at Rand McNally and Google, etc., all those places got together in a room somewhere and said, "Let's get B.J. Clarke," and come up with some plan and plot. Whoever wrote those directions down, someone else copied them and someone else copied them, and they said to make the wrong direction turn. Is that a big deal to turn the wrong way? Yes, it's a huge deal. And I had not gone that way before. I was trusting that GPS. Thankfully, the God positioning system, better than the GPS that Abraham was following, would never lead him astray and never lead him in the wrong direction. And Abraham, verse 9, by faith sojourned in the land of promise as in a strange country. He's dwelling in tabernacles with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of that same promise. Now drop down, if you will, please, to verse number 17, and let's keep Abraham in our view as someone who believed in things he'd never seen. Here's Abraham, and when he's first known as Abram at 75 years old, God says in Genesis 12, you're going to have seed that will bring about one who will bless all nations of the earth. So he's 75 when he gets this first initial promise. At 86 years old, he still doesn't have that boy. And then he does something very foolish. He listens to his wife Sarah's suggestion that maybe Hagar, her handmaid, could become the mother of the child, the surrogate mother of the child that then Abram and Sarah would continue to regard as their own. So he tries to substitute. And God talked to him and reiterated the command, the promise that he'd made. Another 13 years go by. He still doesn't have the son of promise. He has literally waited almost a quarter of a century for that child. The child finally comes. Isaac finally comes. When Abraham now is about 100 years old. And his wife's in her 90s. And then we're not told the exact age that he was when this command was given. But after waiting a quarter of a century to even get Isaac, now God says, all right, take him up to the land of Moriah and sacrifice him to me. Wait a minute. He doesn't have any children. He doesn't have a wife yet. He's not old enough to be married and perpetuate your seed promise. If I kill him, there goes your promise. Abraham did not conclude that. He concluded and calculated, and this is the literal word, the Greek word for accounting in Hebrews 11 is very interesting. Zoom in on verse 17 and notice what's said here. By faith, Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac, and he that had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said that in Isaac shall thy seed be called. Accounting, there's the word. From that Greek word logizomai, which means to logically compute, to use reasoning to come to a logical conclusion. This is the mind of Abraham, the faith of Abraham. He's saying, all right, God, you said that I would have a child and that through him someone would someday come and bless all nations of the earth. I trust you. I take you at your word. You've now, after waiting a quarter of a century for him to even arrive, he's now lived a number of years to where he can carry wood on his back. And I tie him down to this wood and I'm about to sacrifice him. But instead of thinking to myself that this is the end and there goes your promise, God, Abraham had done the calculating, he'd done the math, so to speak, in his head. And here's what he'd figured. Here's what he'd calculated. God was able to raise him up even from the dead. Stop right there and ask yourself this question. Start in Genesis 1 and go through Genesis 21, because Genesis 22 is where Abraham is told to do these things. You tell me how many recorded resurrections from the dead in history have happened between Genesis 1 and Genesis 21. How many recorded resurrections from the dead do you have in all those chapters? How many? You don't have a single one. If there'd never been anyone raised from the dead before, Abraham, what makes you think Isaac could be? Because I spelled my God with a capital G. And if God is powerful enough to make all of this, if he's powerful enough to make this, He is powerful enough to raise a man from the dead. If he could use the dust of the earth to create man for the first time and breathe into him the breath of life and give him a start and make him come alive, he can make him come alive again. That's how much faith I have in God. I trust him to be able to do things I've never seen him do. And then you notice verse 20. Isaac, how do you know what the future holds? He blessed Jacob and Esau concerning, notice, things to come. They hadn't come yet, but he's predicting them as certainly as if they hadn't. And then you'll notice Jacob is dying, verse 21. What's he doing? Blessing each one of the 12 sons with anticipation of what's coming in the future, including Judah. The scepter shall not depart from Judah. Judah is going until Shiloh comes, until the one who's bringing peace comes. Yes, there is a Shiloh, a Shalom, one coming to bring peace. He's coming. And you haven't seen it yet, but you believe. Yep, Joseph, do you believe that there are things you've not seen that are going to happen? Yes, he's dying. Joseph is dying in verse 22. And he made mention of the exodus of the children of Israel. And he even gave them commandments saying, when you leave Egypt, you take my bones with you and make sure they get buried with my family. They're not even in bondage yet. Joseph, how can you anticipate a deliverance from bondage when they're not even in bondage yet? Because God has revealed things to me that I believe are true, because even though I've never seen them happen, I trust God. I take him at his word. Moses, what about you? You have been raised to visibly see the treasures of Egypt. You see the power of the Pharaoh. You see all of this, and yet you made a deliberate choice to do what? Look at verse number 24. When Moses was come to years, old enough to make his decisions, he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater than the riches of treasures in Egypt. Greater riches in Christ than treasures in Egypt, because he had respect unto the recompense of reward. You're about to see our theme spotlighted here in Hebrews 11 once more. Watch verse number 27. By faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king. He endured as seeing him who is invisible. Moses, have you ever seen God? Well, I saw a burning bush. God spoke to me out of the bush, but it wasn't, no man has seen God at any time in his full essence. What makes you believe that God is really going to do what he said he's going to do? I take him at his word because of what he's already done. And I make the deliberate choice to follow him. And that's why, as Moses leads the children of Israel, he demonstrates faith to them. And look at verse number 28. Through faith he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood. Now let's try to put this in perspective. Imagine you are an Israelite living in Egypt under the plagues, living in the area of Goshen surrounding the time of the plagues, and you have been given a warning that this 10th plague is going to kill the firstborn in every household unless you take a male lamb of the first year that is without blemish on the 10th day, and you keep it till the 14th day of the same month, and you kill it in the evening, and you strike its blood on the two side posts and on the upper doorpost of the house wherein you eat the Passover. If you'll do that, I'll pass over that house. Any house that has that blood of an approved lamb applied to the door in the proper places, I will pass over, and you will not die in the 10th plague. How many of them, upon hearing Moses and Aaron give them this, could say, yep, we remember the last time we did that, and that worked? They've never ever done this before. So what makes you think this is going to work if you've never done it before and seen it work? We see the invisible God, and we see his evidence. We see his existence is on display by what he's already done, and we trust God. The same God that made this and made us and led us and saved us through the plagues is the same God who's going to spare us this time too. They trusted God. Okay, now picture this. They finally get out of Egypt, and now they're at the Red Sea, and they're just so close to freedom on the other side. But wait a minute, here come the Egyptians. They're in hot pursuit. Some of the children of Israel are afraid. Moses, look, look. He says, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. And God says, no, Exodus 14, you tell them to go forward. The waters are parted. Walls of water on the right hand and the left. The ground is dried sufficiently for them to walk over it. And what makes them think those walls of water will not collapse? How many other times have they been invited to walk through a Red Sea situation like this? How many of them can say, I remember the last time God told us to walk through walls of water and they didn't collapse, so we're good. I'm sure that past evidence is good for the... No. They didn't have a specific thing that man had ever seen done that would give them confidence this would work. But they did it by faith. In fact, look at these two verses together in verse 28 and 29. Through faith he kept the Passover. Verse 29, by faith they passed through the Red Sea as by dry land. The Assyrians tried to do the same thing and they were drowned. And then the walls of Jericho. Fast forward to all the years of wilderness wandering are now past. It's time to enter the promised land. We're here. We crossed the Jordan. We're here, and now Jericho is ours. God said he's given it to us. He's given it to us, but how will we conquer it? Would you go to Joshua 6 as we start closing out? Joshua chapter 6, because here you get the battle plan. I mean, Jericho's a walled city and massive walls. How are we going to conquer a city that has such massive walls? At verse number 2, the Lord said, Joshua 6:2, see, I have given into thine hand Jericho. Okay, but how will we get what you're giving us? You shall, verse 3, compass the city, all the men of war. You go around the city once, and you do this every day, once a day for 6 days. Now, you don't say a word while you're doing this. You don't make a sound. And then he goes on to say in verse number 6 that verse number 5, it shall come to pass when they make a long blast. This is on the 7th day. On the 7th day, verse 4, they should compass the city 7 times, and then the priest shall blow with the trumpets, and the people will shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat, and then you just go right in and take the city. That's the way it's going to work. Picture this. You're waiting breathlessly for the battle plan to be revealed, and they come and say, okay, we finally got the intel on how we're doing this. All right, here, get ready. The men of war are going to march around the city once a day for 6 days. On the 7th day, we're going to march around it 7 times. And there's going to be the blowing of the trumpet and the shouting, and the walls will fall flat, and we'll go in and take the city. That's it. That's the plan. How many of them, upon hearing this, would say, I remember the last time we did that. That worked really well that time. Yeah, this is good. Had they ever done anything? Had they ever seen something like this work before? Yes or no? You see the invisible. You believe that God can do what he's never done. Just because he's never done it doesn't mean he can't do it unless it's something about his character. He cannot lie. We know Titus 1:2, Hebrews 6:18. But he can do with God, all things are possible. God, nothing shall be impossible, Luke 1:37. You have faith and trust God to be able to do what he said he's going to do, and they did what God said do, and look how well it worked out for them. And so God, constantly throughout the book of Hebrews 11, is saying, see what I did there? You didn't see it done in the past, but look what I did. And then look at verse number 31. After the walls of Jericho by faith fell down flat, now Rahab, by faith the harlot Rahab, did not perish with those that believed not, when she received the spies with peace. Rahab, have you ever seen? No, I tell you what I've heard though. I've heard about all that God has done to these other places. I believe God can do it here too. I trust God. And then the Hebrews writer says what every preacher feels. Time would fail me. I'm running out of time, and he says, what more will I say? Time would fail to tell of Gideon. Gideon, come here. You're going to go fight thousands of Midianites with 300 soldiers. Only 300. Can Gideon say, hey, I remember all those other times 300 conquered thousands? Yep. Yeah, we got this. Gideon, have you ever, no, I've never seen it, but if God be for us, who can be against us? Romans 8:31 says rather. And so you look at this. David, have you ever fought a 9-foot 9-inch tall giant before? If that's what his height was. Some have speculated he may have been that tall. David, have you ever fought somebody that big before? A military man, trained military man? No. What makes you think? Have you ever seen someone that's just a shepherd boy, your size? Have you ever seen someone go out and conquer a giant like that before? I have seen this. The Lord delivered a lion and a bear out of, he delivered me out of the hand of a lion and a bear. I think he's got this. What God has already done convinces me he can do what I've never seen him do. Samson, have you ever seen a moment like the one you're about to explore with the Philistines being gathered here together, and whether your strength is returned? Have you ever seen anything like this before? I have not. I just trust God. And then look at verse 33. Last part of the verse. Stop the mouths of lions. Daniel, why are you refusing to pray? Or why are you refusing, rather, not to pray, I should say? Why? Don't you know the threat? I know. Well, have you ever seen someone survive the den of lions before? I have not. What makes you think? I think God is able. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, also known as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Have you ever seen people thrown into a fiery furnace and survive it? No. Our God is able to deliver us. Daniel 3:17. We trust God. We know what he's already done. Convinces us he can do what we've never seen him do. And then finally, as we close out, look at verse 34. Turn to flight the armies of the aliens. He not only quenched the violence of fire, like with the 3 men in Daniel, stopped the mouths of lions with Daniel, but he also turned to flight the armies of the aliens. Jerusalem, can you see what's outside your city? Yeah. 185,000 Assyrians at least. We know there were at least that many because they didn't wake up one morning and there weren't arrows sticking out of them. God had miraculously conquered them through some means that we're not told the exact nature of, but we know God did it through his angelic power. And so let me ask you this question. Judah, do you believe, wait a minute, the scepter will not depart from Judah? That's a promise God made. If Judah gets wiped out, there goes the messianic hope. We trust God to do what we've never seen him do. Hezekiah, do you believe? Yes, I believe. And in 701 BC, 185,000 Assyrians didn't get up one morning and proved God is exactly capable of doing what no one thinks he could do. So that brings it to you and to me. I'm 63, and that's not ancient, but it's as old as I've ever been. So for me, it seems old to my former self. And some of you are saying, you're a young whippersnapper compared to what we are, young man. But if the Lord lets me live, yeah, my dad is 20 years older than I. I watch him and I see some of his struggles and some of his limitations, his pains. And I think that'll be me someday if I live that long. Yeah. And for the first time, I'm starting to think more about, I have less time on this earth than I've lived on it, unless I really set some amazing longevity records. I don't have as long to live as I've lived on the earth. So what do? Start being filled with despair. Oh no, oh no, oh no. No, I start thinking, okay, what's next? After I die, what's next? And I see these people. Some of them, verse 35, receiving their dead raised to life again. As some of them were tortured, they didn't accept deliverance, so they might obtain a better, here it is, resurrection. Even the tortured ones knew that there's something waiting for me on the other side yet. Others had trial of cruel mockings, scourgings, bonds, imprisonment. They were stoned. They were sawn in half. They were tempted, slain with a sword, wandered about in sheepskins, goatskins, destitute, afflicted, tormented, of whom the world wasn't worthy. They wandered in deserts, mountains, dens, caves, and these all having obtained a good report through faith, received not the promise in their day and time, but God having provided something better for us, that they without us should not be made perfect. And then in chapter 12, remember the book, chapter, and verse divisions, not in the original document. We go right from Hebrews 11 into Hebrews 12, which depicts those cheering us on, as it were, as we run our race, and Jesus is there at the finish line. One of my favorite television sports moments will always be what happened at the Olympics many years ago when Derek Redmond was running the last leg of the race, a long race, and he was on his last leg, literally. The way the race was designed to finish is you come into the stadium for your last laps and finish the race in front of a cheering crowd. He was injured in the race near the end of the race, but he was so determined that he was not going to quit. He just kept on. It got harder and harder for him, and when he got into the stadium, it was apparent that he was barely able to walk, much less run. His father came out of the stands, actually came on down to the track, and made that last lap with him. Our Heavenly Father knows what we're going through. He knows the struggles and how hard it is to keep on keeping on. But I want you to believe in things you've never seen. God is there, and He cares, and He's cheering you on and waiting for you to finally get to the point where He can say to you, well done, good and faithful servant, enter in to the joy I've prepared for you. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before Him endured the cross. You and I may endure some things, but we know there's a finish line that is a happy ending to this story. Yes, there is a definite happy ending. And that's why if you hear the worst news possible from a doctor, I'm sorry, it's malignant, it's aggressive, you know, whether I survive or whether I don't, God's got this, God's got me, I'm blessed, and there's hope because God is always there to be with me. Never leave me nor forsake me. So maybe you're not a child of God. You need to be. Run the Christian race by hearing, believing, repenting, confessing, being baptized. for the remission of sins, as the book of Acts teaches repeatedly. If you've already done those things, but you have wandered away and maybe even deliberately walked away in the past, and you're now coming back to your faith and looking for a way to get back to peace and happiness again, God is so ready to meet you, to help you, and to forgive you. And it would be our thrill to see you restore your faith in a way today that would bless you here and hereafter. As together we stand and sing, won't you please restore your faith, or embrace it for the first time?